Good morning, Western Washington, and happy Thursday. I'm Matthew Fab with Western Washington Weather, and today we've got a lot to talk about with the incoming heat wave that, in my opinion, is going to be a pretty significant and long-lasting one here across Western Washington. So we'll get into that in just a moment here. I wanted to start with the satellite imagery. You can see mostly clear across the region, no smoke really coming off the Bear Gulch fire, and you just got some high clouds moving through the area. Take a look at some of the smoke coming out of some fires in the Idaho Panhandle there, but that's not impacting Western Washington at all. Pretty nice to see the mostly clear skies here. You can see a little bit of snow left on some of the volcanoes, but other than that, there's barely any snow across the area. So let's take a look here at some alerts. Excuse me. So starting here with the orange, this is a heat advisory. This is in effect for the entirety of the Puget Sound metro area, except Whidbey Island and the North Strait, or the northern Olympic Peninsula there along the Strait of Juan de Fuca. And we'll take a look at what this alert is for in just a minute. For southwest Washington, including Clark County and then down into the Portland metro area, you have a extreme heat warning there, and that is in effect until 5 a.m. Tuesday, and you can see the same thing here for the heat advisory, 11 a.m. tomorrow to 5 a.m. Tuesday. So that is a very long heat advisory. Out here in eastern Washington, you also have an extreme heat watch in effect from Saturday afternoon through Tuesday evening, so another very long alert here. So you can see we're kind of in this for the long haul here in terms of how long this heat is going to be lasting for. So looking at that heat advisory here for the Puget Sound area, in effect from 11 a.m. Friday to 5 a.m. Tuesday, and you have high temperatures in the mid-80s to 90s expected and low temperatures mostly in the 60s. This will pose a moderate risk of heat-related illnesses. And so that is just really something we need to watch for, especially with those low temperatures only getting into the 60s. And just look at the duration of this, Friday to Tuesday. That's a pretty significant length of time for a weather alert to be in effect here in Western Washington. So taking a look at kind of why that is happening. So this is our overall pattern today. See this ridge building to our north? That continues to just dominate the area all the way through Saturday and Sunday. You can see it's still up here Monday, and then Tuesday it starts to push a little bit south. We get a little bit of troughing right here that pushes some of this ridging away midweek, but then by the time we get to the end of next week and by the time we start September, so I know we're looking pretty far out in the extended forecast, but some of this is just showing the ridging continuing and potentially building back in as we go into early September. So we've got a lot of potential heat here over the next couple of weeks, and it's something we have to watch very closely. So let's dive right into it here. Daily high temperatures here. This is the national blend of models. Highest resolution forecast here run by the National Weather Service and does pretty well in terms of temperatures. So this is for today, Thursday, from Seattle northward. You have highs in the mid to upper 70s, maybe a few low 80s there in some of the mountain valleys. And then from Seattle southward, you have highs in the upper 70s to low 80s, mid 80s for southwest Washington, and then low 90s there for Portland, and then mid 70s on the coast there. Some of that offshore flow begins. But take a look at the huge increase as we go into Friday. From Seattle northward on Friday, of highs in the low 80s to low 90s. And especially the hottest there east of I-5, and then from Seattle southward you have highs in the mid-80s to low 90s. From Olympia down to Portland, those highs are in the low to mid-90s, and then southwest Washington and Portland you have highs in the upper 90s to low 100s, potentially 100 degrees, maybe a little bit warmer there for Portland and Vancouver. And then take a look at the coast. Highs along the beaches there in the mid-70s, inland a little bit in the low to mid-80s, so 84 in Forks, 81 in Hoquiam, 80 in Astoria, and we continue to warm up as we go into Saturday. Take a look at some of these temperatures. On Saturday, from Seattle northward, you have highs in the mid-80s to mid-90s. From Seattle southward, you have highs in the low to mid-90s. Upper 90s not out of the question. However, a lot of areas right along Puget Sound will remain in the low to mid-80s. Maybe a few areas up toward the Strait of Juan de Fuca, potentially even staying in the 70s. But other than that, most of the region will be in the 90s. And then from Olympia down to Portland, highs in the mid to upper 90s, potentially low 100s there, especially in Clark County and around Longview. There you see Longview at 98, and then Portland to Vancouver at 101. And then as you look along the coast, that you can see that offshore flow continuing with those highs in the mid 70s on the beaches, in the low to mid 80s just inland. However, that starts to shift as we go into Sunday. Those temperatures cool down a little bit there on the coast, back to the low to mid 70s, some upper 70s inland. And we cool down a tad bit here in the interior. From Seattle northward, highs drop a tiny bit there to the upper 70s to mid 80s, some upper 80s and low 90s east of I-5. And then from Seattle southward, you have highs in the upper 80s to low 90s, mid 90s from Olympia down to Portland. And so it is a little bit cooler, but not very much. So Sunday's still going to be a very warm day. And then if we go into Monday there, you see we cool down a tiny bit more. For Seattle northward, highs in the upper 70s to upper 80s. Most of the hot temperatures east of I-5 and in some of those mountain valleys. And then from Seattle southward there on Monday, you have highs in the upper 80s to low 90s. And Olympia down to Portland, highs in the low to mid 90s. The coast remains in the mid 70s. And then as we go into Tuesday, where that heat advisory ends, maybe it will get extended if some of these temperature trends continue. Those highs Seattle northward on Tuesday in the upper 70s to mid 80s. Seattle southward on Tuesday, highs remain in the upper 80s to low 90s. And then you're looking at highs in the mid 90s still for the Portland metro area. And then the coast still in the low to mid 70s. So you can see there is just, if you go back through it, you see today is our last day with those highs in the 70s. And then you have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 straight days potentially for Seattle and Portland with highs in the 85 to 95, maybe even 100-degree range down there in Portland. And then even as we go into Wednesday, it remains in the mid to upper 80s for most of the Puget Sound area and low 90s for Portland. And we may start to cool down to the low 80s by the time we get all the way to next Thursday, a week from now. So this is definitely a long duration event, and that is where the impact of it is going to be. As far as temperatures go, not the most extreme temperatures, upper 80s, not really going to set a ton of records here around the area, but the duration of it is what is the problem. So, and you can kind of see this when we go into the low temperatures. So this is Friday morning's lows, and these are pretty typical mid-50s, low 60s in some of the warmer areas. But take a look as this heat wave begins. Look at Saturday morning's lows. Upper 50s to low 60s across western Washington, upper 60s for southwest Washington and Portland. Then going into Sunday, this is where you really start to deal with some of the problems because a lot of folks around here don't have air conditioning, and when you only get lows in Seattle dropping to 66 degrees, it doesn't really cool off very much. You can see lows near 70 in Portland, most of western Washington with lows in the low to mid 60s, only the coast getting into the upper 50s there. Then going into Monday morning, you can see again lows in the low to mid 60s for most of western Washington, near 70 for Portland. And even going into Tuesday morning, still in the mid 60s for Seattle and Portland, and some of the outlying areas dropping to the upper 50s to low 60s. Wednesday morning, we are still in the low to mid 60s for the metro areas. And maybe by Thursday morning we start to drop again, but there's a potential the heat wave will just ramp back up as we go into the end of next week. So you're looking at a few nights there in the mid-60s for the metro areas. That's Saturday morning, Sunday morning, Monday morning, Tuesday, and then Wednesday as well. So this is something you really got to be prepared for. If you struggle with heat, if you know people that struggle with heat, please check in on them and just help people to not have any issues or heat-related illnesses during this long-duration heat wave here. And then this is just an interesting plot to look at. So this is our change from average temperatures here. So this is Saturday at 2 p.m. And this is just showing how warm this is above average. Because as we start to get into the end of August here, our average temperatures do start to cool down slowly as we head toward fall. But take a look at this. This is Saturday afternoon. Those temperatures we'll be having from Seattle northward, are you looking at 10 to 15 degrees, maybe 20 degrees above average. And from Seattle down to Portland, you have those highs likely being 15 to 25 degrees above the average temperatures for this time of year. So that is pretty interesting to see just how warm it is in relation to what is typical across the region. And then this kind of just tells you everything you need to know. This is the European model's extended forecast through Friday, September 5th, and you can see not a drop of rain for most of Seattle and Portland, and maybe a little bit some random showers at times toward the end of this forecast period. But overall, extremely dry across the area here going through the end of August and into September. So this will allow probably the Bear Gulch fire and some other fires to ramp up. If we get any thunderstorms across the area, they could be dry thunderstorms, and we could start to get more fires. So there's a lot of unknowns kind of going over the next couple weeks here, but one thing that is likely is that it's going to remain on the drier side, at least for the next week and a half, maybe 2 weeks here going to the end of August. So then I wanted to take a look at some extended forecasts here because the maps we were looking at earlier don't really tell a full story. This is the SeaTac airport forecast from the European model. You can see today mid-70s, and then we warm up on Friday into the mid-80s. 3 straight days near 90 there, Saturday, Sunday, and Monday. But then look at the European model. It doesn't really have us cool down that much. It still shows 86 on Thursday, 82 there on next Friday, but then it warms back up again into the mid-80s. So this could be something that's going all the way through the end of August, depending on how some of that ridging sets up to our north and to our west. It could just keep the heat going for the next week or so here. And even if you look at these low temperatures, mid 60s, really not good to see. And then this is Portland. You can see potentially 4 straight days near 100 degrees or above. That is pretty significant there. That does not usually happen in Portland. And look at some of those lows near 70 degrees, and it doesn't cool down all that much either. A lot of 90s and 80s showing up here in the extended forecast as well. This is Hoquiam on the coast there. You can see 3 days in the 80s. That's unusual for the coast, especially in late August, but you do get it when you have that offshore flow. And the temperatures could very well be much warmer than this for a brief time too, depending on how some of the offshore flow goes. And then you can see Olympia, mini days here in the 90s, potentially 4 straight days, maybe even 5, depending on this one here Wednesday, in the 90s. And then we cool down and maybe warm back up again. You kind of see these patterns here showing up as we go into September. And then finally, this is Bellingham. You can see when you got more exposure to the water there and some onshore winds, the temperatures are a little bit cooler, only getting into the 80s and then maybe staying in the mid-70s. But we'll see. Sometimes this can be a little bit off. If you get any offshore flow out of the Fraser Valley in toward Bellingham and Vancouver, BC, these temperatures can definitely get up into the 90s. So now I wanted to take a look here again, the Bear Gulch fire. There hasn't been much activity on it lately thanks to that atmospheric river we had a few days ago that has really stopped the activity. It is now up to 11% containment, which is very good to see. However, I just wanted to point this out in the daily update today that they're saying here Thursday we'll see a major pattern change to hot, sunny, and dry and potentially unstable conditions expected for the weekend. Very warm and dry conditions with clear skies will cause additional drying across the fire area with an observable increase in fire behavior. So we're going to have to watch this very closely over the next few days here because it's likely going to start ramping up again. We'll see those heat signatures popping up around the perimeter of the fire on satellite imagery there. And we're likely going to see more smoke out of this. So right now it's 8,500 acres and it is 11% contained, but we likely have a ways to go with this fire, especially with some of these heat conditions coming up. And then just wanted to point this out for the end of August here, 6 to 10 day temperature outlook. Look at that signal for above normal temperatures in the Pacific Northwest. You're looking like a 70 to 90% chance of above average temperatures. And then precipitation, you kind of start to get some of this monsoon signature here, but take this with a grain of salt at this point because none of the forecast models are really showing a huge amount of precipitation, especially the European model barely showing anything. So we'll have to watch the precipitation aspect a little bit closer because any thunderstorms and stuff we get up in here during this time is not going to be a good scenario. So yeah, thank you all very much for watching here. Be sure to subscribe to the channel here. I'll be doing daily videos here as this heat wave continues, as these temperatures get warm, and I'll be posting updates on my social media as well on Blue Sky, on Twitter, and Western Washington Weather Facebook group. So the links to all of these are in the description, and of course you can subscribe here to the channel. It's been growing a lot, so I'd love to see that continue. So yeah, be sure to stay tuned for updates and be safe out there with all the heat coming. So thank you all very much for watching, and I'll talk to you all tomorrow.